Just gives you a little bit of information about our toolkit approach. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. So when you leave today, you will leave with some ideas that you can try today, tomorrow, Monday. We wanted to, since we had a very short time with you, we wanted to at least give you some stuff that you might be able to apply in your daily living, in classrooms and so forth. So this just kind of is a low or no technology, assistive technology chart for you and some ideas. And the book goes more into depth, and we'll try to give you some more ideas as we talk, especially if we get the slides up. I don't know, it's not looking hopeful. The second handout we have for you is called Assistive Technology Links. It's a 3-page handout. We also have this handout on our website. So if you want to go peruse our website, you can find it there. And I think they're going to live stream this on the FAST website as well. So they'll be live. But if you wanted to, we wanted to have a hard copy. So if you wanted to look at some of these links, they're just a variety of research links and applied links on assistive technology for young children for your reference. One or more of the links has some assistive technology policy and technology use with young children on the Fred Rogers website, and it's very new. It's 2017. There's a whole new thing about using technology. So I'm curious of all of you here, who are you? Are you parents? Everybody's parents? Grandpa. Ooh, that's good. Who did I miss then? Because it looks like every. And who are you?
Oh, you can jump in. And
Speech therapist. Okay.
Kathleen.
OT. Great.
I'm Sharon's going to kick us off, and then we'll go. Resume.
Okay, so now we have to start again, but
we'll resume. That's
anyway, so I told you about the AT links, and you can even go on right now and play around if you want to on your phone with some of the links. Okay, we're going to get started again.
All right. Good.
Hi, everybody. If there's anybody still coming in, please come up to the front. Sit as close to the front as possible. We've had some great handouts up front. I'm Sharon Weil-Chalker from the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics. I am thrilled to welcome you back to the second part of our educational summit, our annual educational summit. We are so lucky to have Nancy Robinson and Kathleen Sadao. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I think they've already kind of done that. We're going to try to hold our questions to the panel discussion that follows this one. We're going to be, I think I will pull the name for the for Carolyn Musselwhite's AAC in the Desert after this session, immediately after this session, because the slackers next door kind of got us behind because they're all putting their names in. Thanks everybody for being here.
Okay. It's meant to be.
Okay. So you can't see us down here. It's not a computer. Okay.
Thank you, Sharon. I don't know if I think I'm live here. I'm Nancy Robinson, and my colleague Kathleen Sadao has already kicked us off and done a great job in introducing us and acquainting you with the materials that we have to share. So we're thrilled to be here, and we absolutely love talking to parents. We're learning a lot about Angelman syndrome. It is, as you all know, not a very high incidence kind of disorder. So it's not something that crosses our paths often, but it's so compelling thinking about children, particularly our focus is young children. But what we hopefully have to offer to you today applies to all ages of people who need help communicating and participating in daily activities. And our focus is really looking at assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication tools from a wide range, looking at low-tech, moving from very simple tools that you can use in everyday activities to more sophisticated things that you can use in terms of computer-based technology. So we hope today that you'll take away some very practical and useful ideas to use with your families. Our objectives, I think you already kind of went over this a little bit, But specifically, we really want to introduce you to a range of things that are useful and applicable and inexpensive and useful in everyday activities, and to think about how you can inform the professional teams that you work with to really look at applications throughout the day, not just in one clinical setting or a school setting, but it's every minute of the day, every activity, there's an opportunity to use AT and AAC. And then we have, as Kathleen already acquainted with you, some really wonderful handouts and resources that you can take away. So with that, I think we can continue where you left off.
Okay.
Learning to use this, advanced tool here. There we go. So you all have experienced various levels of technology and applications with your families, with your individuals and your families who may need them, with your children. As you know, assistive technology and AAC is changing all the time. Technology's been advancing astronomically over the last decade, and I personally have a hard time keeping up. But I think that in the hands of families and children, there are so many tools that you can use today that we're really excited to share some of this. We really have some pretty solid research behind us, not just the two of us, but the whole field, in the importance of introducing assistive technology and AAC very early in life and building communications early so that participation becomes inclusion in schools and families and childcare and shopping centers, wherever you go with your family, restaurants. There are many opportunities. From some things that we've done in our work over, you said 30 years. I think it might be a little more actually, but 30 years is good. We wanted to point out some of the research that we've found and really looking at compiling it in our book that was published in 2010. We felt like we really needed to gather a lot of the wisdom in the field into one tool, one place that providers and families could have access to, and putting that, I guess you could call our book kind of a big old toolbox, that access to literacy begins before language, before reading, before vocabulary, that there's so many tools and opportunities that can help access literacy, adapting books and making them so that children who have limited motor abilities can still enjoy literacy. You can support attention and literacy development with lots of adaptations. Modifications of learning environments. Looking at universal design for learning is a concept that a lot of teachers now know about and use, but it's become more widely accepted that designing learning environments for everyone, making visual maps on the wall, visual schedules, picture books, and placemats with pictures, voice output devices, makes learning more accessible for all kids. And that early intervention, as we know, starting the earliest we can in life, in the young years all the way into early school years, is where we need to begin with communication tools and learning tools. So we have strong research behind us, and that really supports the importance of starting with children and early school years. Do you want to talk about some of the FAQs? Lots of parents ask questions, and these are some of the questions that I know that may be on your minds. We're not going to go into each of these right now because of the time limitations, but we have many resources available to you, both on our website, and I think our link is going to be presented at the end of this, and I think our materials are, I was told by Nicole Mead, our materials will be posted on the FAST website, so you'll have access to all of this information. These are live links, and they go to current information to help address some of these questions. If you have questions that come up when you're working with your teams in schools or early childhood centers, these are things that you can address. Who uses it, and how do I know that's right for my child? If the provider that you're working with doesn't know a lot about AAC, you can present some of the information and access local, state, or national information that can help you. So types of symbols, types of devices There are lots of questions that need to be addressed and answered in the process of determining what's appropriate. So at this point, we want to just spend a little time looking at the different types of assistive technology for young children, the whole range, the whole gamut of what's available, starting with some really simple low-tech items. And I think Kathleen and I have worked a lot in the last 10 years, even more, 15 years, on developing access to toolkits for families that you can use in your daily environments. So looking at low, mid, and high-tech tools. Some of the examples that we have, you can kind of look at, for example, if the purpose is to increase participation with books, games, and activities, and to be able to communicate in those activities, we can use very low-cost tools, such as adapting books with page turners, and we're going to show you some examples of that. Making books so they don't move around so much, so they can stay stable in one place, using simple either photographs or drawings of communication symbols, and creating daily schedules. These are just some examples. And some of the, do you want to talk about some of the mid and high-tech tools? Or on this
From
side?
our handouts?
Yeah, right. As you have in front of you, you'll have this handout. Do you want to? Did you already go over that?
Well, we didn't really go over this,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's kind of similar to what the types of AT. Basically, this just helps you think about what kinds of technology approaches you might want to try. And oftentimes, low tech is readily available and at low cost, so it's sometimes easier to try low tech. But now with the advent of the iPad and Android tablets, apps sometimes can be even as easily accessible and inexpensive as other low-tech, materials. So I think that's all I would want to say about that.
So as you advance in using different kinds of technology and trying out tools in different environments is really the only way. It's kind of a trial and error process, but it is a step-by-step process. So we're going to go over some of that. But looking at all the ways we can adapt toys, there are ways that we can build toolkits. So you can actually have them in your own homes, in your own settings, so that you can try some of these things out. And some of the examples that we'll show you have to do with adapting books, adapting for literacy, adapting for play, adapting toys, and communication tools that start out with simple communication books, photos, eye gaze boards, and then, of course, using computer-based devices and digital devices. So let's look at a few tools and show you. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, you want me to? Okay, so what we found is having a toolkit, not only can you have one at home, you could, if your child is being introduced to a new classroom or some kind of a new setting, having a toolkit to even offer to that speech and language pathologist or the occupational therapist is really a nice way to go. It's kind of a way to introduce your child to that new environment, that new activity, and gives them some opportunities to be immediately infused into that learning environment. So, for instance, with baggy books, what's really cool what's really cool about baggy books is you can take, your child's favorite book or a book that's maybe in the current curriculum. You can cut it up, you can take pictures off the internet, and you can make baggy books. The way we make baggy books is we use a heavier bag than just, sandwich bags from the market. It's a little bit more durable. I mean, you can use sandwich bags, they're just not as durable. And we put pictures of the books. It allows us to put any kind of text in there. So we may want to just put some simple text or maybe more involved text. We may want to be able to put Velcro on the outside of the baggy book so we can have props. So there's a way to communicate. So if your child is non-communicative or has limited communication, even using another language such as sign, props gives them a way to talk about the book, to interact about the book. It's one thing to listen to a book, but it's another thing to really ask those questions and be involved in the story. The Baggy Book gives you that opportunity. And everybody can have a book, so we really promote that. Oftentimes in circle time in a preschool setting, you'll see everyone sitting around the circle and the teacher with the book. What we really promote is everyone having a book, having their material, so they can share and show and look and pull props and really become interactive and engaged in that activity. So we love Baggy Books. And up top is a sentence strip. Instead of using words, they're using pictures. So it's showing story sequencing, which is another skill set for young children.
Yeah, so making these tools accessible, again, we've done a lot of work to compile lists of materials that could go into toolkits, and they're very affordable. I think we got something around $100 total to put all of this together. So it's just knowing where to get the materials.
And on our handout with the AT links, there's handout for you can order rolls of Velcro, or you can go to Staples and get some Velcro dots. They're really easily available and accessible. For props, you can go to Michael's and get sticky back foam and build up all your little picture props. It's very easy to make this stuff, and it's fun. You can have a small group of folks making their own Baggy Books. So we love the Baggy Book. And if we had time, we'd have you all make Baggy Books.
We'd love to do that. But a lot of times what we do in workshops in California, what we've done is parents like you and teams, intervention teams come together, and by sharing these materials with your teams, you can say, I'd really like to have a parent workshop where we do this together. And they found lots of applications where they bring their photographs of a recent birthday party or a family event or a trip, or even just introducing family members so that the kids can then just carry these books around with them wherever they go, and they have a way to communicate and talk about their experiences with anybody they meet. And they're just really accessible and easy.
So you can go to dollar store. I don't know, do they have dollar store everywhere?
In Chicago.
You can go to 99-cent store, Dollar Tree, or whatever, and pick up really cheap photo album books and put pictures in there and sequence stories about your family to introduce. So they have a way of introducing their family. Maybe they can't say it, but they can show you, this is my dad, this is my mom, this is my sister, this is my dog. It's just a really wonderful way to allow them expression. If they can't use words, there's so many different ways of expressing themselves without using actual words. Also, too, another item we just really love is highlighter tape. You can order that online, too, and it's on your AT links. It comes in all these great colors, and it really is helpful to, when children are pre-literate or just learning about words, it's really helpful to highlight repetitive lines in stories or highlight that favorite word in the story. And so highlighter tape is another great thing to have in your toolkit.
Now, one technique using the highlighter tape, I don't know how many of your children love Green Eggs and Ham, or any books that have repetitive lines that you've read 1,000 times and you think, really, I have to read this one more time? You could highlight the favorite word and then just not say it and let them point to it and let them say it or begin to say it a little bit. So that's a way of filling in and getting them to pick up vocabulary by highlighting keywords that they love. And going off from that, from Baggy Books, developing simple communication books. And you probably have thought of this or done this, but in dollar stores and also in drugstores, many times you'll see the really inexpensive little photo books that are plastic with slip-in pages. I have found those to be really accessible tools for just putting in photos of family members, favorite toys. Sometimes they get kind of fat and you have to go on to other books. But it's really kind of a beginning step to getting more ready for a system like POD, where you have pragmatically organized dynamic display, where you actually organize pictures. This is a lot of what Linda Burkhart does. And I think Kelly Fonner probably talked about this today, but being able to begin recognizing pictures and symbols And you can see in this one example, we put a photo of the child's school environment and then a symbol that goes with it. So they begin to see the connection between pictures and symbols. It's a little easier later on in communication systems to use symbols because you can fit more on, and they can mean different things to different people, whereas it's very difficult to get photographs of every single part of their day, and symbols can be a little more efficient. So we want to make that connection as soon as we can.
And not only that, if your child uses an iPad or a tablet, there's many apps that you can develop picture stories with. And we actually have an app list. So during the Q&A, if you're interested in that kind of technology, we're not going to go into apps because we don't have enough time. But we have a lot of information about that. We spend a lot of time focusing on how we look at apps and assess apps and what apps are out there for young children. So if you're interested, we do have an app list, and maybe we'll just put it on our website so you can have access to it later if you would like.
And while we're talking about communication books and really low-tech beginning communication tools, I want to say just a little bit about communicative intent. This is a lot of work has been done with children at the pre-linguistic stage that aren't really beginning to understand pictures and symbols, but you want to help them to make choices, and you want to read into everything they say that there's meaning. Research by Stephen Calculator and Cynthia Kress, those are two researchers that have done a lot of work in this area, to treat every communication, a slight gesture, a look, a sound, as meaningful, and you react to that. Mm-hmm. So by showing a child a picture of something they might want and holding that toy behind the picture, you help them associate, again, a symbol with an actual object. And you can have them look at that picture. If they don't look interested, you say, oh, you don't want that right now? Okay, fine. We'll give you another choice. What's something else you want? And sometimes it's helpful just to present two pictures, and wherever they look, that's it. You go with a choice. And the child begins to learn that their communication has meaning, and their choices have consequences. If they didn't want that toy right now, or maybe they actually did, and you didn't see them look at it, the next time they might get a little more deliberate about it. Or if they look at another picture of a ball and they just look at and glance at it and you start playing ball, they understand that that is going to get them the activity. And it's a very simple concept, but it's hard to react to every time you see a communication behavior. And treating all communication as meaningful and then building up to symbols is where we want to go. Another tool that we've developed is called visual scene display, and this is built off the work of Janice Light at Penn State, using a photograph of a child's actual environment and building some communication stories around it. It's very flexible, very easy to do, taking a photograph, and this is something if you have access to somebody who's interested in getting these symbols for you, your speech pathologist or special education teacher, early childhood teacher, elementary teacher, anyone that has these tools, and they're readily online now, can make these simple photographs with, and we color code them because the yellow part is supposed to be for nouns, the pink is for actions, and the blue is for adjectives or feelings. And you can begin color coding. It's a system of communication to organize vocabulary and help them realize parts of speech. But you don't have to get that complicated. You can just say, oh, we went outside, and what did we do outside? And you pick a picture and put it on the board, build a little story, and then you can talk it through, have the child kind of point to what happened first, to tell you a little bit about what made them happy or what they liked. And there are lots of other ways you can do this. I did this at a preschool, but it could be done in any environment. A zoo, a trip to the mall, or holiday shopping, anything that's going on, a family gathering. And then you can repeat it and talk about it that night before you go to bed. And you have a way of kind of encapsulating that experience and helping them think about it and talk about it. Toy adaptations. I'm going to ask Kathleen to take this. She's the expert on adapting toys.
So there's a whole chapter we did on play and toy adaptations, and there's some really great websites that are on your AT links that you can go to and get some other information about. But there's so many different ways to adapt toys, and sometimes when toys are not easily accessible, a child may give up too soon. So when you make some adaptations to them, for instance, if you put knobs on a puzzle, and some of them come with knobs, but it's very easy to go buy knobs at Home Depot and glue them on the puzzle pieces. It just makes it a little bit easier to access the puzzle. And really with a puzzle, it's not about so much as putting it back and forth. It's really looking at that visual pattern. And young children in preschool, it's all about patterning because that's pre-literacy. So you want them to be able to play with that puzzle and put the pieces in where they belong because it's about the visual. It's not so much about putting it in and out. A little bit about fine motor, but when you can use Velcro to, if you have a toy car, for instance, that's just a little bit hard to push, you can put a knob on the top of a car with Velcro. And it makes it so much easier to access and navigate and play with. We like contact paper because you can put contact paper on pictures and then it becomes so much more durable. Sponge curlers are great. Again, another Dollar Tree item. You get these little sponge rollers and you can adapt every pen, pencil, paint, brush to make it more accessible. And try it. It's so much more comfortable to hold on to, a narrow pencil or a narrow paintbrush with a sponge roller. And just using, in preschool, for instance, and sometimes a bit in early elementary, a lot of the centers are labeled. So instead of just labeling it with words, use picture labels for the center. And really guide children by using pictures. I talked about sticky back foam already. Shelf liner is a great tool. You may have heard of using this before. It really stabilizes toys. So if you have a toy and it's just on here, you might reach once and it's on the table. If you have shelf liner, it's not going to go very far. And so then you can have several attempts to get that toy and not be frustrated because the toy is already on the floor. It really does stabilize anything you want to do in an area. And sometimes you'll see you can put it in a cookie sheet, and then that gives a parameter for your toy or your game or activity. It's a very inexpensive way to kind of help that approximation so your child doesn't end up getting frustrated because they have to try so many times and the thing keeps falling on the floor. So many ways to adapt toys. And just for me, it's always just going and looking at that toy in a different way. You can take toys that make sounds or toys that move, and you can adapt it with a switch very easily. You get a switch adapter. They're online for like $6. You stick that switch on the battery, and now your child can actually activate that toy. They don't have to try to find the button on the bottom. So there's very many ways to make toys more accessible for young children.
So it's all about participation and being able to take part in everyday activities and play. Another area of communication for many children who have difficulty reaching and touching pictures and pointing to pictures, often eye gaze can be a tool for communication. And we use that early on in communication, but it can also last for a long time. And as you know, you probably know, some of the high-tech systems of communication now depend on eye gaze. Children can actually calibrate their own eye gaze to a certain point on the computer screen, and their eye gaze acts as a cursor and activates the picture and the voice in a system. So using low-tech systems for whoops, I guess I should advance the slide so you can see what I'm talking about. Using low-tech systems for this can help prepare for later if eye gaze is going to become a method of access to communication. You don't have to go to a plastic store, but in California, and I don't know if they have them here, but there are many stores called Tap Plastics, and they sell remnants of plastic, and it's pretty easy to get clear plastic that you can use. This is a kind of a more traditional form where it's cut out in the middle so that the communication aid or anybody that the child is communicating with they can see the child's face really clearly, because you want to see where their eyes are looking, and you want to take that as a signal, as a choice. Using simple 4 corners with different pictures to choose activities, and it can get more complicated you can put more and more pictures on as they get more able to direct their eye gaze and learn that you are actually going to hold them to that choice. We've found just simple clear plastic clipboards that you can find at Staples can do the same thing, or any clear plastic. Plastic's definitely better than anything else because you can wipe it off. It doesn't break usually. And it does get scratched sometimes, but they last quite a while. So those are just a few tools that you could easily access and start out trying out with your child. We have many more, and there are more resources that you can access on some of our materials on our website, which we'll show you how to get to. We wanted to mention, just kind of briefly, a process of assessment that we call FEAT, Functional Evaluation for Early Technology. Deciding what tools to use isn't just simply trial and error, it's a process. And if we have tools to try out, then we know you have some basic experience when you begin to make choices for your family and your child. The steps that are involved in this process are really something that a whole team would go through together. So as a parent, or a grandparent, a family member, you can take this guide to your team and say, we really need to kind of follow this process, maybe not just our process, but many assessment processes that we gather. We looked at 6 different types of models for all ages of children using assistive technology, and we identified these 6 steps as some of the most important. Getting the family and child information from the family. What works in your setting? What works in your home? What works in the environments what are the things that you want your child to do and participate in? And then what are the activities every day that happen? And then third, what can we observe in a setting? Maybe it's in a clinic or a school, but how can we set that up so it might simulate some of your activities in shopping or going to a restaurant so that we can actually provide some communication tools and see how the child interacts with those tools or play with their family or peers. And then after that, number 4, we all get together as a team and brainstorm with you as a family and decide what worked best, and then we select some tools and try it out. And a few months later, weeks later, evaluate what's working and change it. These 6 steps are not necessarily linear. They can be cyclical, and it's something that we could repeat. We kind of see this process as ongoing throughout the child's school years, looking as they grow, identifying new tools, new environments, and getting more and more sophisticated. But interestingly, even with adults, at San Francisco State, where I work as a speech pathologist, I have a group of adults who come every week for a conversation club. And these are all adults in their 20s and 30s with different kinds of communication needs, but the one common denominator is that everyone uses some type of AAC system to communicate. And even those with the most sophisticated computer-based systems still use their low-tech tools. Simple VOCAs, voice output communication aids, where they like to tell a joke, or they like to greet somebody, or tell a story, and they don't really want to go through the whole system of using or programming into their communication device. And it's always interesting to me how it's a combination of tools. It's not just one tool. The goal is communication, and we have to figure out all the different tools. So the more we start early and collect and try out through the child's life, we find out that the whole system needs to be operational altogether. The other thing that we want to stress, and Kathleen can chime in here, is the importance of teamwork. How many of you can identify a team that you work with in your schools, your communities, your settings? I can't really see out there, but I see a lot of hands.
Everybody?
Everybody.
Couple people, no team? How many people don't have a team they work with? You're teamless? Okay, we probably need to
You're the team?
explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that is probably the one critical piece of all of this to make it work, is to identify 1, 2, 3 people that understand what you need and can help you access it. You as a parent are as you know, the strongest and best advocate for your child's communication and learning. It often seems that the people you work with don't always know what the tools are or what the assessment process is. And that's why we wanted to equip you with some initial tools that you can start with. Both Kathleen and I really believe very strongly in something called activity-based intervention. And we want to also give you that vocabulary, if you're not familiar with this, that it's not about just using a tool. It's about participating in every part of life. So as you work with one provider, two providers, a team, hopefully everyone would have a team, we need to help everyone understand, and I think most best practices are that we work throughout the daily environment, but to understand that every intervention, if we're going to use a communication device or a voice output communication aid or a picture book, it needs to be functional throughout the day. There needs to be ways to use this throughout the day. We'll illustrate some examples for you in a second. That it's really based on the premise that learning takes place all day long, and communication opportunities occur at bath time, meal time, play time, story time, tickling time, anytime, riding in the car, going on a plane, going on a bus, shopping, that it's throughout your day. So being able to give you those tools to use every day, and think of the opportunities. There are thousands of opportunities throughout the week to practice skills. And it doesn't have to be hard work. It can be fun and embedded in everything you do. So that's what we're all about. And we wanted to just kind of walk through some examples. I know this is a busy chart. Again, it will be available to you, and you can download it. We thought it would be a great handout, but we didn't quite get to that point. These 2 pages that we wanted to show you are called an ecological model. Those of you with a biology or science background probably have an understanding of what we are talking about more than we do, that ecology of a person's life is in many, many environments, starting at home and building out from there. So using an ecological model, thinking across the day, across the environment, and everywhere you might interact. We really love this model and find that if the more we can support this, the more we can disseminate and get this idea throughout the intervention services that are provided to all of your kids, the more success and the more opportunities they have to learn. So we're just going to take an example. I'm going to ask Kathleen to do one about increasing participation to build social interaction, which is a really good place to start.
Okay, so we have 2 handouts. What I'll do is these 2, because they're really hard to read because they're pretty dense. So I'll make sure that we put it on our website. So if you want to access these handouts just to get an idea, these are just examples. I mean, it's huge, but it kind of gives you an example of how to go about this in an IFSP or an IEP meeting. So this first handout is focused on birth to 3. So the first column is IFSP goals, and an example is increased participation and building social interaction and turn-taking. And then what we do across the handout is we look at different routines, snack and mealtime. How might that look in snack and mealtime? Well, you might use sign language or some kind of gesture to request more. Bath time. Maybe a talking picture frame. There's many talking picture frames you can get you can get online, and you can tape your message. If any of you have ever done that for friends, you know they have them available, and so you can have a picture. You can make sure they're laminated with contact paper, safe for bath time, and you have a message about something fun in the bath. I like to splash when I'm in the bathtub. But just a very simple message, and they can press that picture and the message occurs. They're expressing what's going on. I really enjoy splashing in the bathtub. Storybook reading, another area. Maybe you have an adapted story with Velcro attached pictures or objects to remove, such as a baggy book. And then circle time or music time, you might record a message on a Big Mac to enable the child to say, "My turn," in circle time. So that's just an example of how you might come up with some objectives based on, one IEP goal or IFSP goal of turn taking. And similarly, you could do it for an IEP as well. So then the next would be an IEP goal, and here we have the first one is developing vocabulary, same thing. You might have a VOCA that you use where your child is able to greet each child. Maybe you have a sequence, a VOCA that's sequenced in. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Sam. Hi, Terry. They get to say hi to everybody as they come into circle time. Same thing with art. Maybe they request art supplies using a VOCA. In play, requesting a favorite toy using a VOCA. And story time using props again. So there's many ways that you can look at having that goal achieved in various routines throughout the day. So these are some examples. Okay.
Yeah, that's really, it's endless once you start. But we thought these kinds of tools, when you go to IEP meetings or meet with your team, these are things you can say as, these are activities, these are examples, and let's take off from there, and you can brainstorm and fit it into your life. One thing I wanted to illustrate just a little bit more is language is more than just words. It's telling stories. And one of the goals on here, you can't read it probably because it's so small, but one of them is called oral narrative development. I think there's some people over there that we can't see. Telling stories. Some of those tools that we illustrated earlier, like the visual scene display, where you take a picture of a favorite place with some little symbols about what they experienced, and you can build stories around that. So choosing pictures to tell a story just before bedtime about what you did that day. Or that could also be at circle time at school, where the teacher can provide some pictures to tell a story about the weather, what happened yesterday. These are simple tools to communicate. And describing art projects to peers using a voice output communication aid where they might record something like, that picture was really cool, and that was something that I really liked, or I love the color you used. They can actually comment on other people's artwork and become art critics. Taking turns in dress up and other play centers, story time again, repeating foods eaten by the very hungry caterpillar. That's a really effective way to use voice output to name all the foods in the book. And then just a sequence of activities during snack time using pictures. So as you can see, there are just endless ideas here. We wanted to just mention, and I'm going to actually ask Kathleen to mention, some of the devices that are available to you. How many people here use some kind of iPad, iPhone, Android, or other kinds of mobile technology with their kids?
And then a second question would be, how many people here have children who use the iPad to communicate? Okay.
Quite a
Dedicated devices, because some would use a dedicated device where an iPad has locked into a dedicated.
Absolutely, yes.
Sure, sure. So how many dedicated iPad
Or device, yes.
or device? Awesome. Okay.
So quite a bit of technology. So the range of technology is very broad. And the touch screen, of course, provides access to so much more than even, 10 years ago? I think we're looking at...
Well, it came out, interestingly enough, the iPad came out in 2010 when we were finishing our book. So it was right on the crux of, this new revolution. And right away, people started going, have you seen this? Have you seen this app? Have you tried this? It was very exciting. And it's just revolutionized, really, what we can do today, I think.
So just by way of closing what we're talking about right now, we wanted to kind of highlight the rapid changes in technology and some of the, I think we're almost beyond this now, the questions, 5 to 6 years ago, is technology appropriate for very young children? And there were some questions about screen time. The American Medical Association said we needed to limit the time that children were in front of these kinds of digital devices. I think we may have moved beyond that.
Yeah, and there's the AMA and some other organizations we've referenced, National Association for the Education of Young Children, Fred Rogers Center on Technology and Learning. They all have recently revised comments or newly developed policies around screen time and screen use. And bottom line is, as long as it's used in an interactive way, it's a great tool.
Yes, especially used in social interaction with another person. The tools and apps are endless, and thinking thoughtfully about how they're used. You had a good example with your family in Palau.
Oh, so I was visiting my husband's relatives live out in Palau, which is out in the very western part of Micronesia. And my 1.5-year-old grandnephew is on his mom's phone using some really violent app, because that's what they had available. And so I just looked over and went, oh my gosh, he's 1.5 years, he's shooting people on this app. And he was so into it. He was so, he was moving them all around. And I said, oh, here. And I have this app called Furry Friend Leonard. I don't know if any of you, has anyone ever used Furry Friend Leonard? You got to get this app. I think it's free. And then if you want to add a little bit more interactivity, it's 99 cents for each thing. But anyway, Furry Friend talks back to you. So if you have an expression or any sound, a laugh, a breath, he repeats what you say. And it's hysterical. I mean, every time I use it, I start getting, I crack up. So I introduced that to him. So bottom line, he loved that. And then I had a couple of award-winning apps. One is Itsy Bitsy Spider and Wheels on the Bus. And so I introduced those to him. And because they were so interactive and fun, he loved them. And I had my niece's husband said, where do I get those, Kathleen? Where do I get those? I go, okay, let's get them right now. Get that gun app out of here. So, sometimes children are exposed to an array of more inappropriate content apps. And there's many wonderful ones out there. And as I say, we have a couple of app lists that we can share with you if you're interested.
So just looking at what's appropriate developmentally for your kids. Those are some guidelines to think about, but I thought that was a great example.
Yeah.
Okay, so just in closing, we wanted to highlight again all the functional areas that technology can support in early language, communication, and all the other areas of development that the apps are out there. I think they increase by 50 every week. There's so many. We can't possibly keep up. But your guidance and choice as a parent is critical in making sure that they're supporting the skills that you really want to see develop.
And I think, too, again, using this kind of a research base, these are all based on research. You can use this in an IEP meeting or an IFSP meeting to show the reasons why you might be having your child using an iPad in the classroom or using it during a period of time that maybe was typically not appropriate for that classroom. Sometimes you need some reasons or some research that gives information to why it's appropriate, and you can use some of this for that.
So I think that just kind of reinforces what we're saying, that there are many types of apps that support these skills throughout daily environments. So, in closing, we want to just emphasize the tools are not the goal. The goal is communication and learning. And finding the right tools does take some time and some trials, but hoping that you can access some very simple tools to start with and have a range of options. We have a lot more information that you can access. Do you want to say our link here?
Oh, what's that?
There's a lot more information in our book, not to just necessarily advertise that, but we do have things on our website, and we'll post a lot of these materials that you can access for your teams or building your teams.
Is that a live link?
Yes. Well, I think it is. If I can, I don't know how to access.
Oh,
the
you
cursor.
can't access it,
Right.
huh? Can you go to that link? Whoever you are back there.
So you can kind of see what we're talking about.
So there's some stuff on here, and I will add some more too. And again, if you're interested, you can email us. We're happy to respond and chat. And then if you have some questions, it sounds like the Q&A next would be a great time to ask us about resources, materials, or anything else. But, you know, honestly, if you haven't done a toolkit, as Nancy says, some of the low-tech things like a simple VOCA and some of the highlighter tape and contact paper is a great way to introduce these materials to a new classroom teacher, especially in inclusive settings where they might not be as familiar with ways to universally design their classroom. It's just a great way, and everybody likes presents and likes gifts, and so it's a fun way to introduce your child to a new classroom.
So you are essentially the tools here, and you will make communication supports happen for your children. So thank you.
And we have 2 minutes before we move on to the next one. Any questions? Comments? We have a mic. Could you go back to the second to last slide?
Oh, about the apps for daily activities? That one? Oh. Oops, sorry, I went too far. I think we're getting there. Okay, that one, right? The idea of this slide is to really help identify when a mobile device is used in your communication or learning, that you can advocate for how it's used in what activities and what apps actually support those skills.
So there might be, if you're using an iPad as a dedicated device, that's one thing, that's communication. But if you're using an iPad just to explore learning, maybe there's some storyboards on there, maybe there's some stories, maybe there's a favorite game that your child likes that they want to share during circle time on that iPad. By linking the different goals that your child may have to daily routines, it gives kind of a justification of why your child might be using that game during circle time, or why they might be, I don't know, what else do we have up there? Like during art, for instance, there's some really fun art apps out there where you can scribble and design and pick colors. And so maybe in preschool you're working on colors and the teacher has a particular art activity. Well, if you connect the glow paint app with the art activity and say, well, my child is going to be doing glow paint during this activity. Some of the other kids might want to do it too. But it links why you might be using that app for that purpose, as opposed to your child maybe not having access to that activity. It just helps, I think, teachers and other folks understand a little bit better why you might be using the iPad for different areas of the day. Does that answer your question, or? Do you want to know specifically about some of the apps, or? Hello? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't post the app list, but we only had an hour, and so that's like a whole nother. I mean, we could do a whole couple of days on apps. Well, and as you all know, they change frequently. They don't always get updated. So it helps to go and see what app, I'm forgetting the word for it, but if it's new or if it's from 2014, maybe it has some problems with it. Yeah, you can do a visual schedule on. They have apps for visual
There's
schedules.
an app for that.
They have an app. I think it's $2.99, and I haven't looked at it recently, but it's called First Then Visual Schedules. First I do this, then I do this. 2 pictures. Very simple, but we use that kind of phrase all the time in our communication, right? You can do it on the iPad, and you can have all these different first then. First, I eat my dinner, then I get to go play. Or first I do this, then I get to go do that activity. So yeah, there's a billion of them out there too. And we tried to go through, and we have a rating scale for apps. Like I said, we have a whole nother presentation that we do on apps, how you can take a look at apps and look at the app characteristics, what things should you consider, things like color and sound and amount of text, and is it intuitive? Is it easy to figure out? You don't want to go and pick an app and buy it and then find out, oh, this is so cool, I'm going to do some visual schedules. I got my first then, and you can't even do it because it's not intuitive, or it's just too complex, or maybe it's too simple.
Or distracting for them.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is for you to know what the goal is. And if your goal is for the child to greet people, then it's really up to your team and your providers to help you find that right app. You don't have to do it all yourself, but you know what the goal is.
You had a question?
Yeah, I guess my question is, do you believe that there are prerequisite skills that kids need to have before they get onto let's say, a more rigorous device?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Did everyone hear that? Can you repeat your question?
Do you think that there are prerequisite skills that kids need to have before they go to an AAC device?
My belief, no. I think an iPad, for instance, is so intuitive, and that there's so many skill sets that you can learn by playing with it. My 1.5-year-old nephew, that, I mean, there may be some prerequisite skills that you might need for particular aspects of an app, but no, I don't think you need to have prerequisite anything, especially with an iPad, because it opens this world of exploration, right? You touch stuff and then it happens. It's cause and effect. And cause and effect is something that we learn when we're in infancy. When we're before a year old, we're working on cause and effect, right? So most children have cause and effect skills. And iPads allow us to do that. We can explore cause and effect at whatever level we're at. So, and I'll let Nancy speak to it too, but no, I don't believe you need prerequisite skills. And I think sometimes that is used as an argument for not purchasing a tool.
Question?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Oh, here's a mic.
Do we need to break before the panel? Or okay to keep going?
I'll let her. She can do it.
Okay.
So this piggybacks that a little bit, and it's a little individualized too. So we were just recently diagnosed. My son is 15 months, and we actually have our IEP meeting on Tuesday. So this is perfect timing. We're excited to come with a bunch of information. We are getting that pushback. Like he said, the prerequisites of fine motor skills, understanding, cause and effect. If I press this, this happens. And so their recommendation was to actually wait until he got right. And I've heard from the community, no. But so this meeting is on Tuesday, and I want to bring to the table everything I can to prove that we need this now. And so they already kind of know that that's where I'm headed. And my speech therapist has said, well, we're a little afraid that he may not qualify for the latest technology. It might be a switch that he's 15 months. So thinking that he may not get the best technology, which doesn't seem like a great argument to me. So I want to come as prepared to the table, and you guys gave us so many resources, but if there's one or two things that I can point them to say, this is what you need to look at, and this is why we need to do this now, what would those things be?
Well, I think Nancy talked about our FEAT assessment tool. So
Right.
it's got to be an ecological model. It has to be routine-based, and it has to be based on trials. And so you want them to be able to say, yes, on your IFSP, which is probably an IFSP if he's under 3. Is it a he or a she?
It's a he, and we're
What's
in
his
Illinois.
name?
Wesley.
Wesley.
Yeah.
So for Wesley's IFSP, you want to make sure that they're familiar with some kind of an ecological model, or just show them the FEAT model. I want to make sure that we work as a team, that we identify some tools that we can explore, go back developmentally, what we're expecting of a 15-month-old. We're looking at some cause and effect and some exploration of voice and expressing. You can go back. CDC has a new app, that's the Center for Disease Control, on typical development. And you can look at that and look to see, well, what's expected for a 15-month-old? What might I expect for my child? What kinds of things should I be looking at? And so using that assessment model, because then it's not, he's 15 months, so no, he's not old enough yet. You're actually looking at what his skill sets are and what his needs are based on a model or an approach. And you're assessing over time. So you're saying, today we're going to look at this, and then we're going to have some trial and error. And then Nancy may have some other stuff to say, too. You can tell we're very passionate about this.
The readiness model, the concept that a child has to be ready for a communication tool, is really been not supported by research. The skills that you need to communicate are basically indicating some choice and some intent in your communication. So if that is there, the access is for us to figure out, not for the child to get ready for.
Right.
So trying out different tools is a trial basis, and even if they say, they, meaning the professionals might say they're not really willing to recommend a high-tech device, you still have to try them out before they're purchased. So there's no harm in trying, and if you can, my approach has always been to simulate before purchase. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad that simulates some of the features of a high-tech device, and that is successful, that's good trial information to try out. So sometimes you can kind of reach a little compromise there where you're not, I need to go for that $10,000 device versus something that's $1,000, and maybe we can try this out and then show you that the skills are there. It's a developmental trajectory, I think.
All right, we're going to wrap up this. We're going to wrap up this session. Let's have a round of applause for Nancy and Kathleen for all the wonderful information they brought us.